Hello and welcome to the One of 20 podcast. My name is Jonathan Sweeney. Today is Thursday, March 25th, 2021, but it is an even more special day for me. Today is the Day of Miracles. Quinnipiac University's dance marathon, Q-thon, has our Day of Miracles every year, and we try to raise an allotted amount of money. This year, we're trying to raise $62,000 in one day. And I have been texting my family members, my friends, my loved ones, coworkers, teachers, everyone, you name it, I've been texting them for a donation. I started off this morning with $833, and now I'm nearing $1,400. I don't know math, but I think that's like $500, which is fantastic. I am so excited to be here today because we have a very special guest, someone who is very near and dear to my heart, Georgina Lloyd. We talk all about diabetes, we talk about hypoglycemia, the differences, the struggles, and overall being chronically ill. Because Georgina's had a very different path than I did with her chronic illness, her diabetes, and we talk about the differences because when I came out with my story and everything that I've been through, a lot of people said I had similar traits to diabetes. And honestly, we're the polar opposites. Not Georgina and I, but diabetes and hypoglycemia. So I'm really excited for this episode. I want to jump right into it because Georgina and I talked for like 45 minutes, I think, and it's going to be a long episode, but it's a good episode, and we really break it down, and we really have an open and honest dialogue about our struggles and what we've been through and what's brought us here. She's a great friend of mine. We were co-workers together, and our friendship grew beyond that because being in an environment where you work long hours, you need to find your people who understand what you're going through. So I won't keep talking anymore. I am so glad to be here, and I can't wait for you to hear my candid and open conversation with Georgina. So today I'm with a very, very dear friend of mine, Georgina Lloyd. We did orientation together for 2 summers. We went to Quinnipiac together. She's an alumni doing amazing things now in her graduate program. And we're here to talk today all about diabetes. The internet tried diagnosing me with diabetes, and I keep having to say, no, like I don't have diabetes. And the internet's still like, well, you have signs of it. So I'm going to have Georgina today talk about all about diabetes. So Georgina, if you just want to introduce yourself, your story, and your struggle and successes with having diabetes.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. I have loved listening to the episodes of the podcast so far, and I'm so excited for the episodes that you still have planned. So I find it funny that maybe funny is the wrong word, but I enjoy the fact that the internet tries to diagnose you with diabetes because diabetes is such a specific illness, and there's a number of different levels to diabetes, different types, type 1 diabetes, type 2, gestational, all of these different kinds. But our symptoms are very, very similar to a lot of things. You start to feel lethargic, so you get much more tired. Your eating habits change. You get dry mouth. You maybe drink a bit more and go to the bathroom a little bit more. You get headaches. You get dizzy. And so when you're trying to get diagnosed with this, the doctors are looking at you like, well, you could have about 100 things. So for most of the time when you go to the doctors and you get sick, they'll do blood tests. And it's that blood test that really diagnoses you. So I would say that most people who Google will maybe have type 1 diabetes, but when they go to the doctors, you probably don't.
Naturally, yeah. I think it's such, I don't want to say like it's so common, but I feel like people nowadays are just so like they're looking for a quick diagnosis rather than like address the problems and the symptoms that go with it. So you definitely bring up a good point because I feel like even on the internet, like people are always so quick to say you have this or you have that. And I'm sure like when you got your diagnosis and like you made your journey, like if you did a TikTok or something for say, people on the internet would try to diagnose you with a million different things. And most of them, 99% of them don't even have any degree, whether it's nursing, medicine, anything in that realm of expertise.
Right. And I think that brings up another great point with diabetes that when we talk about it, we collectively say diabetes. And you usually will hear the comment, my grandma has that, or did you get that because you ate too much food? But what people are actually trying to communicate there is the various different types. So I was diagnosed when I was 9 years old. I was an athletic kid. I was actually underweight. they were concerned that, I was extremely malnourished. And the only people I knew with diabetes had type 2. And that was, they take oral medication and they watch their diet. So when I went to the hospital and the doctor said, you're actually going to take insulin shots 4 times a day, or you're going to use an insulin pump, which is always connected to your body. Little 9-year-old me had no idea. It was mind blowing. And so I think with my condition and with a lot of medical conditions, it's all about just asking questions and getting comfortable sharing answers and really listening to people who are living the experience. Because I always say, what works for me in my diabetes is 100% not going to work for the next person in their diabetes. So although people are trying to be helpful sometimes, you really just have to let people find their own way through it, I guess.
Definitely. And I think even like you saying like, oh, my grandma has it, or like people saying, oh, their relatives have it. I'm pretty sure, like, I know there's what, 3 types of diabetes: type 1, type 2, and then juvenile. Do you have juvenile or do you have type 1?
So juvenile is kind of the old fashioned name for type 1, because back in the day, type 1 was really only prevalent in under 18-year-olds. So that is what I have. And that's usually managed. That means that the pancreas is completely like no longer creating insulin.
Mhm.
Type 2 is when you're possibly insulin resistant. So your body is still creating some of the hormones you need, but just not
Right.
enough of them. And then there's gestational, which usually just occurs during pregnancy. There's type 1.5, which is where you're kind of a mixture of insulin shots and oral medications. And I'm sure I'm missing some out as well. I think there's actually 6 different types, 5 or 6. Yeah.
So different because I have hypoglycemia and I have to have sugars. Like, I know you can't have a lot of sugars,
Right.
and like I need sugars. Like when I go to hypoglycemic shock, like I have to have like candy. Like, I'm trying to think what else. I haven't gone to hypoglycemic shock since I've been like 5. It's been pretty under control. But like anything with a lot of sugars, and I know like sugar is bad for your body and it's detrimental to your health. So like, can you explain to like the viewers at home who might not necessarily know what diabetes is, and like to that extent, like, can you explain what sugar does to your body that's so damaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So, diabetes in general is when your body is either no longer or struggling to produce the hormone insulin. And what insulin does is when you eat something, so when you eat a burger, it insulin takes out all of the sugar and all of the energy and kind of puts it into where it needs to be in the body. So my body doesn't do that. So my injections will do that for me. And when we look at, I don't want to use the word normal here, but when we look at a regular blood sugar, you
Right.
want it to be between 72 and maybe like 130. So hypoglycemia, which is what you experience, is when your blood sugar goes under 72. And in order to fix that, like you said, you're going to need those quick acting sugars. So that's when I have this as well sometimes. So it's when I will take my orange juice or my little lifesaver gummies, which I find hilarious, because they're called lifesavers and they are quite literally saving my life.
Right.
And then on the flip side of that, when you start going above 130, that's when you get hyperglycemia, which means you've too much sugar in your system. And that's when you really want to start flushing your waters and giving more insulin if you're able. Um, but in terms of our diets and how they differ, when your blood sugars go too low, you can effectively, I'm not recommending this, but you can effectively eat as much sugar as you want to make yourself feel better.
Right.
Obviously, you have additional conditions, which means that isn't always as simple as that sounds. But
Right.
your body will get to a point where it says, okay, Jonathan has enough sugar now. I can just stop doing this. Whereas my body doesn't know the limit. So if I continue to eat or continue to drink high sugar drinks, I then start to get those symptoms that I mentioned, feeling dizzy, feeling very thirsty, feeling tired, because my body doesn't have a shut off point by itself. So I have to really watch my diet and I try and keep it as low carb and low sugar as possible, unless I'm in one of those situations where my blood sugar drops.
Wow, I didn't even like, I had a gist of like the the side effects of diabetes and like what you really have to do, but I never really knew. So with your diet, do you like tend to go to like sugar-free stuff? So if there's like like sugar-free ice cream or sugar-free. There's so many things that are sugar-free, like sugar-free chocolate. Would you go to that or would you just like avoid it altogether?
It honestly depends on how much work you're willing to put in, and this is why it's different for everybody. So, on my birthday, for instance, when I really want to enjoy something sweet, that's when I'll usually go for the sugar free, because I'm not going to worry about, the carbohydrates or the fats. I'm just going to worry about the sugar content.
Right.
But on an everyday, I don't want to be eating, say a chocolate bar in the middle of the week, because even if I get a sugar free one, that's also going to come with varying fats, varying carbohydrates, varying proteins. And all of those food groups are going to have an impact on my blood sugar. So,
Right.
yes, in its simplest form, I want to avoid sugar, but I also want to avoid kind of anything negative. Now, of course, I have slip days. I mean, I just came out, you were friends with me in college. I just came out of a 4-year slip.
Right.
Um, we
I'm in
all
the same exact
enjoy,
boat.
yeah, we all enjoy pizza. We all enjoy pasta. We all enjoy like those icy drinks in summer.
Yeah.
But when I'm at my best, it will be a low carb, low sugar, low fat diet. So,
That's so enlightening and so engaging because I'm like on a similar diet, except for I have to have high carbs to make up for the fat my body can't process. So like everybody's like so many carbs. Like I'm like, as long as it has low fat, I don't care, honestly. But like the odds of finding something that has high carbs and low fat is like very rare that it pleases my diet in both ways. And I think that brings me to a really interesting point. I've had this struggle and I've talked about it in previous episodes. It's like we both went to college together, and sometimes I'm not coming for our school's dining hall specifically, but I feel like in a sense, like dining halls, like specifically collegiate dining halls, can be very ableist because everything that I've seen, like they have nutrition charts out, which they never used to have. And it's like a slice of pizza has 25 grams of fat. And I'm like, that's what I eat in like a week if I'm on my best day. Like I have maybe 5 grams of fat a day. Like school week, I have like 5 grams of fat. And like the chicken tenders, 30 grams of fat. And my previous episode that I recorded that came out last Sunday when this airs, I evaluated all the different fast food chains and how many grams of fat are in a meal I would get. And I just think that it's crazy. And going back to the whole dining hall thing, I know I've had trouble with it. Did you have trouble with it at college? Like at any by any means?
yeah, so I'm going to preface with all dining halls for nutrition suck.
Yeah.
Our dining hall in particular, the manager in charge of our dining hall was an angel. And the amount of times I went to his office and would ask him, hey, do we have a substitute? Can you tell me the nutritional information for this? He was great. But the problem with dining halls for my diabetes is even if they put up a nutritional chart, you can't guarantee that every worker is making that food the same.
Right.
So, for instance, you get a chicken wrap for lunch. You know exactly how many carbs are in that one wrap. But
Right.
what you don't know is how much, fat is going to be in the amount of cheese that they put in there, because one
Right.
person might put one slice, one person might put three. So, that was how I struggled with my dining hall. I think they are ableist in the respect that it's hard to cater for every ability.
No,
And
definitely.
there are so many dietary abilities, and most dining halls will cater, for the vegan, dairy. Um,
Right.
Vegan and dairy is the same thing. I meant like vegan and gluten.
Right.
Um, and that is one level of it. But when you consider the additional conditions, it's almost impossible for a dining hall to get that correct. So what I ended up doing, and I imagine you do something very similar, is it was kind of always the chicken
Yeah.
and the vegetables or the salad,
Yeah.
because I know exactly what's in that. It's protein and it's veggies. I don't have to do any math.
Exactly. I'm not a big vegetables guy. I'm trying to change that with the air fryer. But yeah, I do chicken and pasta a lot because I need the carbohydrates and pasta doesn't have barely any fat in it. And then I put chicken on it. It's always grilled chicken.
Yeah.
I love love when I slip. I love fried chicken, but I avoid it. Like I don't like I think it tastes great. But even when I'm on this journey of like going through nutrition labels more often, like if you get boneless or like skinless chicken, it's no grams of fat. But if you get it with the skin, it's like 20 grams of fat. So I always make sure that I get it with no skin because I don't want to put like obviously for a normal person, not normal, for somebody who doesn't have my challenges, their body can digest that and do a cleanse on their system. Mine can't. So yeah, chicken is like a lifesaver. Like grilled chicken saved
Mhm.
my life. Oh my God.
I also think when I was in college, something I struggled with is your schedule is so busy
Yeah.
that most college students, at least one meal, whether it's lunch or dinner, depending on their schedule, they will run through that cafeteria, pick up a bag of chips, pick up, some fries,
Right.
and that'll be a snack and it'll tide them over until they can get a better
Yeah.
nutritional meal later. Well, for me, that was never going to work because, a small fries is going to boost my blood sugar maybe like 100 points. So
Right.
I really have to sit and think about what I'm going to eat, which means when it came to building my schedule, I have to build in like 30 minutes to an hour whenever I want to eat to make sure that I have the time to, go through the lines and get the food that I need.
Definitely. And blood sugars, like I have my glucose meter in my backpack at all times. Luckily, I've been pretty good where I haven't had to check it at a very long time, but it's still the fact. Do you check yours every day? Do you just do it as needed? How does yours differ? Because I know for hypoglycemia, it's a pretty straightforward process.
Yeah, so again, for everyone's diabetes, it's very different. And if you're taking insulin shots, you're probably going to take a finger prick like you're talking about much
Yep.
more frequently. I'm currently using an insulin pump, and I got a really cool techie one actually, where um, it's got a continuous glucose meter that monitors my blood sugar every 5 minutes. It updates the pump and tells it how much medication I need. And I love to
Wow.
show off about this because I think it's the greatest thing scientists have ever come up with.
Right.
Um, so as of right now, yes, I'm checking my blood sugar every 5 minutes. Most of the time, though, we would recommend that you check it in intervals. So before every meal, before you make a decision about how much insulin you're going to give.
Right.
Now, we've already spoken about food and how that impacts blood sugar. Let me blow your mind even more when I say that things like weather will affect your blood sugar. If it's too hot outside, my bloods are going down. If it's too cold, my bloods are going up.
Right.
If I'm exercising, that's going to affect my blood sugar. If I'm in a stressful situation, so before an exam, my blood sugars are going down. If I'm in an adrenaline situation, my blood sugars are going up. So, whilst it's recommended you test 4 times a day before you eat, I've
Right.
always been of the opinion test it every other hour or so
Right.
because there's so many factors that are impacting your blood sugar, and you can be the best that you can be. You're never going to be as good as the organs were originally made to be.
Right. Definitely, and I think that's so interesting that you brought that up, that, like, there's this new technology that, like, it monitors and I'm sure that's, like, a lifesaver because I know probably older people who've had diabetes since they were a child wish that they had this as a child, and I think medical technology is so cool, like, we're seeing this now in 2021. What are we gonna see in 10 years, 20 years, 40 years? What are we gonna see when we're 80 years old? I just think it's so interesting, and with the weather, like you brought up how like your blood sugars fluctuate. Mine, like going off of that, unrelated, but my migraines fluctuate with the weather.
Mhm.
So like if it goes from being 30 degrees one day to 75 degrees the next day, I'll get a migraine. So I definitely think that's interesting how the weather impacts our body, and like we have very sensitive bodies, and we've had so many conversations about this because again we worked with the orientation program, which was a very extremely rewarding, like the job was wonderful, but the hours that went into it weren't necessarily the kindest to our bodies per se. And I think you and I both had our personal struggles with managing my hypoglycemia and your diabetes throughout these rigorous work days. And it wasn't the job itself, it was just the time commitment because we were there working from what, 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. the next day, and then had to be up at 5. And I mean, we loved every second of it. I know I can speak on your behalf too, but it's just when you're chronically ill, like you need sleep, you need to take care of yourself. And I think especially we're both in school and like spring break, like we didn't get a spring break this year. And I didn't get a self-care day. I had to work actually. So I think for our bodies that are so sensitive, we need self-care days. Would you agree?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, again, you bring up another point with your migraines, linking that to diabetes. If I have a migraine and I don't feel like eating, that's going to impact my blood sugars for the next 48 hours. So when we're pushing ourselves, when we're not having these self-help days, if you're studying too strenuously, if you're working on the computer all day and you're giving yourself symptoms that don't seem that serious, oh, you've got a headache today, oh, you're a little more tired. Well, when you've got a chronic illness, that's a domino effect. That's
Yep,
going to impact you for the next week, next 2 weeks. You
yep,
don't know. If you've got diabetes and you don't eat, chances are you're going to pass out.
yep.
If you pass out, you're going to be less productive when you come around again. It's a complete knock-on effect. And I do think sometimes that's where the administration, employees, employers, sorry, they don't see it because, we may have to call in one day and say, hey, I'm tired. I can't come in today. And they're going to look at that at surface value and say, you're tired. You could have gone to bed earlier. But
Exactly.
and when I say we, I mean, when people with chronic illness say I'm tired, they mean my body's at a limit where I physically cannot get out of bed without being nauseous, without ruining my weekend. So,
Absolutely. And I know for me with my migraines, you know how bad I get them. I can't like my migraines get so bad I have to sit in a dark room. I have to lay in the bathroom. Like they go from like one first thing I wake up in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And I think employers, and this brings me to a great point. We were on TikTok one night, and this is how this all spiraled. And I know you saw the video because you duetted it. And it was this guy said, but you don't look sick. And then this girl wrote, I'll never forget it. Not what was it? Oh, not all illnesses are visible. And I think that's a great point. And I think workplaces have come a long way in recognizing that, new laws being passed. And it also brings me to a great point of insurance. I'm currently struggling with my insurance company for medicine I need. I won't divulge much more than that, but and they're just I think these big corporate companies that are supposed to protect you and are supposed to make your life easier aren't necessarily benefiting their consumers in a way because I know for my migraine medication, I get 4 tablets a month and 2 tablets it takes to tone down the migraine a few notches. And then Tylenol, I'll take some Tylenol too. And the end of the day, I'll be 6 Tylenol down, 2 migraine pills down, and 2 nausea medications. And that's horrible for my liver. Mom, if you're watching this, no, you're not.
we're sorry.
We're sorry. And I already have a weak liver as it is. And I think that insurance, just like with medicine, isn't always the best. And like, if you need another prescription, you have one refill or you have to see your doctor again, pay a copay. So I don't want to point fingers at the insurance companies in America, but I think there is a struggle. And I'm sure with you and your diabetes, you probably faced similar things with like your insulin pumps and your everything else that you need.
I mean, hey, point the fingers because, someone's to blame for it. No, I do agree with what you're saying. Insulin in particular is very expensive and it's been proven that it really doesn't need to be. I think to make a vial of insulin, this isn't a quote, but it's less than $10 per vial. And
Mhm.
that vial will last me 2 weeks to a month.
Right.
They sell it for about $400 to $1,000 per vial. Now,
That's right.
obviously, if you've got great insurance, it's not really a problem. I mean, we have phenomenal insurance and I pay about $40 a vial for my insulin. So
Mhm.
I'm really lucky. But I know I have multiple friends who ration their insulin, to make it through to the end of the month. And I come from Europe where we had free health insurance. So to move to this country, it was a big culture shock. And I also think you bring up a good point about your migraine tablets that the insurance company is kind of telling you how many days of the month you can be sick. Hey, Jonathan, we're going to give you this many tablets. So please
Yeah.
don't have any more migraines than what we give you time for.
Right.
My insulin, they give me one vial and they say, hey, that's good for the month. But depending on my age, my exercise, my diet, I'm going to use more or less insulin than somebody else.
Right.
So I definitely think there's room for insurance companies to improve
Definitely.
in various ways.
I just think overall being chronic illness, bringing this to like wrapping it up, I just think that having chronic illness, like you tell an inspiring story, you live bravely. And like, I know, especially you've had so many challenges. Like I've been there through some of them and we've talked about them. And usually we don't talk frequently, but we talk about once or twice a week. And I feel like we always update each other on our health, or if we understand if we don't get back to each other right away, because it's just bringing us down. And like brings me to a great point is with COVID, how has navigating COVID been? How has um, just living with COVID being high risk, how's that been?
Yeah, so I have found there's a positive and a negative to the COVID scenario for me. So I'll start with the negative, and that's I have been living in fear pretty much for the entire year until I was able to be vaccinated because, you know, I already have, as you do, as anybody with a chronic illness does, we already have a weakened immune system. Our
Right,
bodies are already fighting 200 times harder than the majority of people just to basically stay alive every day. And
right,
now I'm potentially going to get a virus that's
right,
going to weaken me to, is weakening young and healthy people.
right,
What's it going to do to me? I live with my parents who aren't particularly in that elder category, but are much older than me.
right.
Um, it's a big risk and it's been very scary. However, what I will say is having the opportunity to work from home has really given me time to be able to focus in on my diet and my routine and get into a nice healthy kind of situation with myself. I mean, I started COVID on the back of my senior year of undergrad. Uh, Anybody who's a senior of college will know there is no schedule, there is no routine. You're just trying to make it through to the end of the week. And so for me to be able to come home and safely stay in my house, work out in the garden or on like the treadmill and get into a good eating habit, I would say that's been my benefit of the COVID period. But my house has definitely been one of fear, and we definitely pulled back in all social aspects for it.
Definitely. And I know my experience with COVID has been very similar. When we had lockdown right about a year ago, from like March 14th, no, I was in Florida until right around, I think it was a year ago today, I got home. I quarantined for 10 days. That was the end of March. And then April, May, and then I finally left the house for the first time on Memorial Day because my birthday was over quarantine. So my family finally got to celebrate, but I'm in the same boat where I limit my social interactions to my main group of friends, my roommates, and then just like a few other friends on the side. But I'm lucky where I'm in an environment where everybody gets tested every week. So I don't necessarily have to be as afraid because I trust my friends. They know I'm high risk. And I think that I've learned a lot. I wish I could have had a regimented diet like you did. Unfortunately, COVID I got a little lazy with COVID. I said, well, you know what? That's not going to kill me. Or what else do I have to do? I'm staying inside. And I kind of just got too comfortable. And I think a lot of people have, even people who don't have underlying health conditions, just became, I feel such like a homebody because I'm like, what if I get sick? Like, I know I'm healthy enough where if I were to get COVID, knock on wood, that I would make it out fine. But there's still that risk of being high risk and immunocompromised where you don't know what it's going to do to your body. And that brings me to a great point is that I'm supposed to get vaccinated this month
Mm,
and
yeah.
high risk people were kicked off the list, which was incredibly disappointing. I think the governor of Connecticut, in some respect, made up for it because now in 2 weeks I'm eligible to get vaccinated because everybody 16 to 34 can get vaccinated now, which I think is fantastic. But I truly do think that high risk people should have been right behind the elderly and healthcare workers because they're the people that are facing the consequences of COVID. I don't want to like get into this political discussion where I point fingers of who deserves it more because as human beings, we deserve our right to a vaccine, But in our society, we live in a democracy where we need to have peace and justice, and we don't want it to be a free-for-all in some sense. So I don't want to say a 16-year-old doesn't deserve it just because they're healthy. Like, they deserve it just as much as somebody who's like 95. But I just think about how the rollout is. And I think Connecticut's done a pretty good job. I was just disappointed being so close to the finish line 2 days before. And then he said, just kidding, wait till April. But luckily, the future is near. And we're lucky that we live in a state that cares about the pandemic. We're not in the southern states. We're not in Florida. We're not somewhere that doesn't care about the virus.
Yeah, I think you raised such a couple of good points here. I think, when we're looking at the vaccine, of course everybody deserves to get vaccinated as soon as possible. And in you saying people with pre-existing conditions and things like that need to go first, that's not you saying other people don't deserve it. But I
Right.
think there does need to be a priority line. And I also think, even though our state has been very good about this, what our state has just showed us is when the going gets tough, we're going to pick the able-bodied.
Exactly.
And I think that's an uncomfortable statement.
No,
But
definitely.
I will say that we live in a state where things have been handled much, much better than others. We live in a country where things have been handled a lot better than others. And I would also say that every time I talk about chronic illness, it's a serious topic and we talk about the realities of it and the dangers of it. But I also always like to talk about the positives of it. And I think what I have seen during COVID is, I'm gonna call, I'm gonna call us the chronically ill here, which is maybe not the greatest
Right.
term, but I think you have seen a collaboration among the chronically ill of, like, via TikTok, via social media, like recognizing that not everybody can see every illness. It comes along with the mental health aspect, but I think what chronically ill people have that maybe people without illnesses don't is a bond. When me and you first met, it didn't really matter if we liked the same music or we liked the same movies, because we had something on a staff of, what was it, like 72 people. We
Yep.
had something that nobody else understood.
Right.
And nobody else will ever understand how we're able to bond like that, but we are.
Right.
So I think, being chronically ill sounds negative, and it obviously isn't great, but a lot of good things in my life came from being chronically ill.
Oh, I agree 110%. And I think there's a flip side. I think that I've been blessed with certain opportunities. Like with Qthon, I've been, because of my illness, it's been my driving force. And like with our job, I've been able to talk to those around me about my illness and my story. And we've been able to exchange our stories that not a lot of people understood. People could sympathize, sure, but like they'll never really know what it's like to walk in our shoes. And I think chronic illness, as sad as it is and as challenging it is, it's also inspiring because we are living in a global pandemic. We are doing we're doing a full coursework somehow, and we're managing to stay healthy, which I think is a huge flex that we've managed to stay healthy for the most part during probably the biggest pandemic of our lifetime.
Exactly. There have been, every day I try and tell myself that no matter how bad the day is, the fact that you made it to the end of it, you did everything you were supposed to do. It was great. Um, and I think I just love that more people are hopefully beginning to see this now. The term invisible illness used to be something that I felt only I used. And
Right.
now a lot of people are using it. You're on a podcast about it. It's brilliant.
Right.
Um, and I honestly do think there's a lot of positives to be said about chronically ill people. I think sometimes those without chronic illnesses just maybe don't ask because they're scared to know the answer. But the answer is, we're doing great. We eat cake, we enjoy our lives, and we do it with a smile on our face.
Absolutely. And I think I've had the best time talking to you today. We could go on for hours and hours. I don't think anybody would want to listen to a 6-hour podcast
I
with just
know.
talk. Maybe our mothers. I think our mothers would. But I'm so thankful, one, for your friendship, because you're like, I have other friends who have illnesses, but like I feel like you're the one I can relate to the most because you keep it real. You don't necessarily hide it when you're having a bad day. You're like, yo, I'm having a bad day. Like you don't necessarily try to hide it, which I think is an admirable quality because you're able to own up and you're able to admit about your health. Like it's not necessarily like you're not embarrassed by it. And that's something I've learned from
Mhm.
you is that like you can just own up to it and be like, I'm not having a good day or I'm having a great day. Like I'm managing. So I have enjoyed having you. I hope you've had as much fun tonight as I have.
Oh, I have. And just one last thing to touch on, I would always say this diabetic never sugarcoats. So keep it real, be yourself, learn to enjoy it. I mean, there's funny parts of diabetes. I'm sure there's funny parts of your conditions as well. Learn to love it, learn to
Definitely.
enjoy it because you were made perfectly. So,
Yes. So thank you for coming, Georgina. Is there any page you want to plug while we're here? Anything for your diabetes?
well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And I plug all diabetic charities, but what I would say to any of the listeners and viewers is research, go to the American Diabetes Association and just give it a quick read. It maybe takes 2 minutes, and maybe you would be able to recognize if I wasn't doing too well one day. And that would really make me smile when I started to feel better. So I'm just going to plug research.
I want to thank you for joining me today on the One of 20 podcast. My name is Jonathan Sweeney. Georgina and I had a very candid and open conversation about our struggle with not only having a disability, but chronic illness and navigating life through COVID. I think it's really important to take the time to learn about someone's struggle through all different lenses because my experience isn't identical to Georgina's. It's actually quite the opposite. But the way we've became friends and the way that our friendship over chronic illness has sprouted is absolutely amazing. So I want to wish you an amazing week, an amazing weekend, and I'm so excited that I get to have a few more episodes with you before I graduate. This is not the end, but I have so much coming up. I can't wait to share with you. I have Q-thon coming up, my birthday, that knock on wood, that I'll be able to celebrate with my friends and family in a socially distanced gathering. And I graduate college in 6 weeks. So much coming up. So excited. And I can't wait to see you next week. Remember, wear your mask. The virus has not gone away. Have a great week, folks.